All right. Volumes of cylinders. Remember, the volume of any prism is V equals capital BH. And what does capital B stand for again? Not base. Not bottom. It's in red. The area of the base. It's capitalized for a reason. Yes, it means base, but not just the length of a base or something like that. The area of that base. It's capitalized for a reason. Now, a cylinder is just a circular prism. So as I'm calculating its area of the base, I'm going to use the area formula of a circle, which is pi r squared. So we're just adding one additional shape to our ever expanding group here. Now we already know cylinders. The cylinder shape is not new. We've already done surface area of it. We haven't done volume of it yet. So for a rectangular prism, triangular prism, and a cylinder, you use the same formula. But capital B, remember we said capital B is like a drop-down menu? You're scrolling through that list of formulas in your brain. You're replacing capital B with whatever your base shape is. If your base is a rectangle, you replace capital B with length times width. If your base is a triangle, you replace it with 1/2 BH. If your base is a circle, you replace capital B with pi r squared. Do you know how to find the area of a circle? Can you tell me what the height of a cylinder is? Then you can do the volume. In fact, you did way more than that when you were doing surface area. This will be pretty easy compared to surface area. Find the volume of the cylinder, write your answer in terms of pi, and round it to the nearest tenth. So according to my volume formula, it's supposed to be as easy as just replacing capital B with pi r squared. Let's try that. This is my circle base. What's my radius of that circle? 4. Pi r squared. Pi times 4 squared. There's my capital B. There's the area of my base. What's the height of the cylinder? 15. The height doesn't always go up and down, but the height always will tell you how far it is from one base to the other base. I use the example of Parker laying down in bed, right? When you lay down on a couch or in bed somewhere, your height doesn't change. You're just rotated, right? It doesn't change anything. So height, quit thinking height as being straight up and down. It can be a depth. It can be like this. It can be, really, it's just the distance between your two circles. So it wants us to write our answer in terms of pi, and that means we're going to multiply everything we can without pi. We did this last section as well. What's 4 squared? 16. And so 16 times 15, I'm not going to times over pi yet. 16 times 15 is 240. And then I can put the times pi or the pi symbol right after it. That is the most accurate answer I can give because I haven't rounded, but it's not the most helpful. To be helpful, I really need to go ahead and multiply 240 by pi, which means I'm going to round because pi is already rounded to 3.14. Plus, we're going to round it to nearest tenth. What do you get for 240 times 3.14, Frank? Did you now use the pi button? Okay, I'm going to come back to you. Yes. Yes. Who do you use 3.14? Ella used 3.14. What'd you get? 0.6. And then Frank, you used the pi button and got what now? 54.9. So it actually would round up right to 754.0. Okay. I'll just put 0.0 so that we rounded it. And that's going to be in feet cubed because we're doing volume. So both of those answers would be accepted. Now I ran into the issue on the other homework. I don't know how many pi buttoneers I have in here, but I ran into one of the homeworks where if you use the pi button and did everything correctly and rounded it, they still counted it wrong. I'm not sure why that was because big idea is let's use the pi button for everything else. So if you run into that issue, try using 3.14 and then let me know that it didn't accept your pi button answer because you were probably right. And for whatever reason, it might the writers of the website could have maybe messed that one up. So 353.6 feet cubed. All right, so let's move on to the next one. We have a cylinder here that has a radius of and a height of, all right. So V equals capital BH. We're going to replace capital B with pi r squared. And we're going to replace H with 6. Now, I don't think you're going to actually have any homework problems that ask you to write your answer in terms of pi. So if you would rather just multiply all those out together, I said yesterday that you could just like have one line of work and then an answer. Because it's not surface area. I don't need you to like do a bunch of different areas and then add them all up. This is easier. So if you just want to write all that down and then plug it all into your calculator, that's fine. Be careful that you're not doing pi times 3 and then hitting the squared button. You cannot do pi times 3 squared. You have to do 3 squared times pi. Do you remember why that is? Order of operations has exponents listed higher than multiplication. Do you remember that? So I got to do 3 squared, which is what? 9. Now I can times everything. 9 times 6 is 54. So actually, I don't have to use my calculator until I get to the 54 times 3.14 here. And that should give us 169.56. Now it says round to the nearest tenth again. So leave it at 0.5 or bump it to 0.6. 6 is going to bump the, thank you. The 6 is going to bump the 5 up. So we'll just call it 169.6 meters cubed. Here's a cylinder that's laying on its side. That's not the unique part about it. What's unique is that they gave us the diameter instead of the radius. Whitney, if the diameter is 3, what would that make the radius? What is it? 1.5. You're exactly right. So we only want half of 3. So we want the radius of 1.5. So replace capital B with the area formula of a circle, because capital B is the area of a base. So pi r 1.5 squared times the height, which in this case is actually a horizontal height. The distance between the two circles is 3, just like the diameter was. So just make sure you know that we're using that height and not the diameter height. I don't care about the diameter anymore. So 1.5 squared, I don't know what that is. So 1.5 squared is 2.25, okay? Times by 3, times by 3.14. So you can just do it all at one step in your calculator. As long as you have this written down and I know what you're typing in your calculator, since it's all multiplication, you can do it in one step and you should get 21.195. Now, if I round that to the nearest tenth, does it stay 21.1 or bump to 21.2? It's going to bump to 21.2 meters cubed. Next problem. Hey, it's kind of like the popcorn problem. We're finding the height. It says find the height h of the cylinder round to the nearest tenth. Well, I know that volume uses this formula, but instead of plugging in for capital B and H, I'm going to plug in for capital B and capital V, because we know the volume is what? 176. That's right. So just like I did before on the last lesson, I'm going to plug in 176 for capital B. Capital B, I don't know yet, but I can find because they give me everything I need to find the area of that circle. But I don't want to use 8. What's the radius of that circle? 4. So pi 4 squared, pi r squared. Got nothing to plug in for h. Now, I know that working backwards means I'm going to have to divide. We did that last time. But I'm going to have to figure out what this pi 4 squared is first. So what's 4 times 4? 16 times pi. Addison. 50.24. So I got 50.24 times H equals 176. And now it's just like it was before. To get H by itself, divide over, because that's the opposite of multiplying, divide over the 50.24. 176 divided by 50.24. Ooh, that's a long decimal, but I only need it rounded to the nearest tenth. So I'm seeing 3.503. Is that going to stay 3.5 or bump to 3.6? Stay 3.5. And my answer is going to be labeled how? Nope. Just centimeters. Yes, it's just centimeters, not cubic centimeters. I already know the volume. It's just how tall it is. So just like the diameter was 8 centimeters, I'm going to label this as 3.5 centimeters. How many? Ooh, hey, it's like our gas problem, except I wouldn't put gas in one of these unless you want to die. How many gallons of water does the water cooler bottle contain? I wouldn't drink anything but water out of one of these. It says round to the nearest whole number. Now, if I'm talking about the gallons of water inside, that's volume. I'm not talking about the space around it, but the space inside of it. So to find the volume of this tank, what I really need to do is to just know that I'm not going to put any water in the cap. And as long as I don't put water in the cap, and I ignore that, what shape is this? It's a cylinder. Yep. So there's my circle base. To find the area of that circle base, I have to do pi r squared. What is the radius? 0.5. It's half of one is a half, right? So pi times 0.5 squared. How tall is the water cooler? 1.7. All right. It's going to give me a decimal answer. No big deal. Pi, but make sure you do the 0.5 squared part first, actually. 0.5 squared is 0.25 times 3.14 times 1.7. If you're doing it along with us, you're getting 1 point what? 3345. Yeah, I'm going to prefer not to round that. So, by the way, you should never clear your calculator. Leave your answer in there because you might have to do something else to it. And the reason I don't want to round here is because I want to round at the end. The sooner in a problem I round, the more accuracy I lose as I go through. So let's round at the very end, meaning leaving this number in your calculator. What am I going to have to do to that number, which by the way is cubic feet? What am I going to have to do to that number so I can go from cubic feet to gallons? If every single cubic foot is 7.5 gallons, and I've got just over one of them, 1.3 of them, what am I going to do? Not divide. Multiply. I'm going from this number to this number. This one's bigger, isn't it? To go from 1 to 7.5, it gets bigger. So since we're in cubic feet, we're going to have to multiply by 7.5. And we're rounding to the nearest whole number. And so this is pretty obvious what it rounds to. What do you get? What do you get, Natalie? Yeah, 10 gallons. Those water cooler jugs are 10 gallons. Yeah, 10.00875. We'll say it's 10 gallons. We're rounding to the nearest whole number. So 10 gallons, not 10 cubic feet, but 10 gallons. All right. Now, the gasoline problem we did from problem, I think it was 22 in last night's homework, that was cubic inches. And we did have to divide by 231. But this isn't cubic inches, this is cubic feet. There's a big difference between a cubic inch and a cubic foot. How many inches are on a foot? So a cubic inch is 1 cubic inch. A cubic foot would be 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, length, width, and height. So 1 cubic inch is, for a cubic foot, 1 cubic foot, I should say, 1 cubic foot is 1,728 cubic inches. So that's why we're having to multiply here, because a cubic foot is actually way bigger than a gallon. And so we have to multiply to go from feet into gallons. So, all right, we will stop there for today. And that means tomorrow, before we start our review worksheet, I will look at with you 14, 15, sit down, please, so people can still see the screen, and 17. Of these 3 homework problems I'm going to look at with you tomorrow, I believe number 15 is the only one you would probably need help with, and you could actually do 14 and 17 on your own if you know what you're doing. So you can give it a shot. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Make sure your 9.4 homework is ready to turn in tomorrow. You don't get 3 days. These are only 2-day assignments. So make sure you're working on it. Right, number 14 from last night's homework says, find the missing dimension of the cylinder. Round your answer to the nearest whole number. Now, we did an example of a problem like this right here, where we had to find the missing height of the cylinder. This is almost identical to that, but you might notice there's one main difference. When they give us the volume of the log, it's already in terms of pi. Don't multiply it by 10,000. We're going to leave it in terms of pi, and I'll show you how that's actually going to save us some time. So start by writing the volume formula that you use for every single prism and cylinder, and it's V equals capital BH. Remember, capital B is your drop-down menu. You click on capital B, it lets you select from several different formulas. If my capital B, if I replaced it with L times W, what shape is my base? What's L times W mean? Length times width. So what shape would my base be? What shape do I do? Sorry, what'd you say? Rectangle. Thank you. If I click on capital B and I replace it with the formula pi r squared, what shape is my base? Be a circle base. Yeah. If I click on my capital B and I replace it with 1/2 BH, it's a triangular prism. If I click on capital B and I replace it with 1/2 B1 plus B2 times H, it's a trapezoidal prism. That's really it. That's all the shapes we kind of talked about. So for this one, I'm going to click on capital B and I'm going to replace it with, because it's a circular prism, a cylinder, I'm going to replace it with pi r squared. And what is the r? Is it 32? What is it? It's half of 32, exactly. The 32 is the diameter, so 16 is my radius, pi r squared. That is my capital B. My h is unknown, so I'm just going to put an h next to that because I don't know what it is. And you don't have to draw the arrows. I'm just trying to show you what I plugged in for which thing. Okay. Now, this problem would be impossible to do if they didn't then tell me what the volume is, but they do. They tell me the volume is 10,000. That's a 1 with 4 zeros. Pi, 10,000 pi. So that's what I got. That's what I plugged in for my volume, plugged in for my capital B, plugged in for my H. What did we do yesterday when we were working? What did we do every time we work backwards? Natalie? Yeah, there's some sort of dividing we have to do, right? So the first thing I might notice is that if I'm going to get H by itself, I should probably get rid of the pi's. Both sides have a pi. So if I divide pi from this side, I can just scratch it out. It's no longer there. If I divide pi from that side, because it also has a pi symbol, I don't need to get my calculator out yet. I can just scratch that pi out. So dividing by pi just meant getting rid of the pi on both sides. So that's why I said don't times it by 3.14, because we're just going to get rid of it right now. That leaves me with this. 10,000 with no pi symbol equals 16 squared H. So what is 16 squared? What's 16 times 16? Addison? That's right, 256. And then, of course, times H. Now what do I do? I'm looking to get rid of H. Or get H by itself. I divide it again. Yeah, of course. Anytime I'm working backwards, I'm going to divide. So, Hunter, what do you get when you divide both sides by 256? What does that make H equal to? Or approximately equal to? 39.060. Okay, so it says to the nearest whole number. So I wrote down the first decimal place you gave me. Hunter, is that 0 going to bump it up to a 40? By no means. So we're just going to say the height of the log rounds to 39 inches. When you're finding the height of a shape, you're not going to put square inches or cubic inches because you're just telling me how long it is. So it's regular inches. 39 regular inches is the height of that log. Number 15 is a little bit different because instead of asking for the missing height, it's wanting the missing radius. Still use the formula V equals capital BH. And I'm still going to plug in pi r squared for my capital B. I just don't have anything to plug in for r because we don't know it. I do have something this time to plug in for h though. How tall is the cylinder? 76. Of course, I also have something I can plug in for volume. It says 600,000 cubic centimeters. No pi symbol, just 600,000. So there's my equation. Let's do the same 2 steps we did last time. First thing we did is we divided by pi. Dividing by pi, I was able to scratch it off of that side. Dividing by pi on this side, there is no pi symbol to scratch off. So I'm actually going to have to get the calculator out and figure out what 600,000 divided by 3.14 is. Go ahead and type that into your calculator. 600,000 divided by 3.14. Put your hand down. I'll call you in a second. Here's why. Instead of writing this down, my next step, so you have it in your calculator. Do you know what 600,000 divided by pi is? Okay. My next step is to get rid of the 76. And what's the opposite of multiplying by 76? Might as well divide by 76 right now. So that number you have in your calculator, just now hit divide by 76. And now tell me what it is. Natalie, what do you get when you divide all of that by pi and 76? 0.97. Okay. Am I looking for r or am I looking for r squared? I'm looking for r, all right? Didn't it say find the radius? So if I know the radius times the radius is 2,512, 13, or whatever you want to round it to, how do I find out what just the radius is? Lucas, what do I do? That's exactly what I do. I use the square root button. Remember, squares and square roots are inverses. I don't divide by 2. That's not how you undo squaring something, because squaring doesn't mean timesing by 2. So it makes sense that I wouldn't divide by 2. What I do is I square root it. I square root it. Look for the square root button on your calculator and see if you can square root 2,512.97. If you have a calculator that you borrowed from me, you probably just hit the square root button. It probably just does it right there. If you have that number still in your calculator, just hit that one button. Lucas, what do you get? Was it 50 point? Okay. So we'll say r squared, or r is approximately equal to 50.14. It wants us to round to the nearest whole number. So 50 or 51. 50. The one's not going to bump the 50 up to a 51. So we'll say approximately 51 centimeters. Just like last time, these are regular centimeters because you're just telling me how long the radius is. You're not telling me the area or the volume, just how long the radius is. We'll talk more about square roots as we get closer to the iLearn test. That's one of the big standards, is they want you guys to know how to use the square root and how to tell if a number is a perfect square or not. Remember us talking about perfect squares? Perfect squares make a big difference when you're using the square root button. There's a very big difference between square rooting 8 and square rooting 9. They're really close, actually, but if you square root 9, what square gives you 9? 3. Yeah. If I square root 8, I'm going to get 2.89, blah, 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 long decimal that goes on forever, like pi. right? And so we would call it irrational. And we'll talk more about rational versus irrational numbers in one of our success times as we get closer to the iLearn test. It's one of their things. They want you to know the difference between those two types of numbers. Number 17 is one that I totally think you could have done on your own. Maybe you did. It says that a traditional square bale of hay is actually in the shape of a rectangular prism. So when I think of a square bale of hay, that's the traditional, like you're sitting around the campfire kind of thing, right? Or it's the ones they load into the back of the wagons. Maybe you're thinking of straw. Straw is typically what I sit on around a campfire, not a bale of hay, but it's going to look like this. Not quite like that. You don't have to draw it. I'm just kind of showing so you can visualize it. A square bale of hay is going to look like this. Now it's actually a square prism or rectangular prism, depending on how you want to call it. And so it's three-dimensional, but they call it a square bale of hay because you got that base that's a square. And here's the dimensions of that square bale of hay. 2 for the length, 2 for the width, 4 for the height. Remember, we said the height doesn't have to be going straight up and down. It's just the distance between your two bases, two square bases. So there's a square bale of hay. This is a round bale of hay. You probably have seen these out in the fields. A round bale of hay has its own dimensions. What shape is it in? Cylinder, exactly, yeah. So it wants us to tell how many of the square bales of hay would fit inside of, if you could fit it inside, a cylinder bale of hay, a circle, what they call circle bale of hay, okay, circle bale. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to know the volume of both. And to find the volume of that rectangular prism, that'd be pretty easy to do. The volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height. So really, what is 2 times 2 times 4?
16.
That's right. And so these were all in feet. So 16 feet times feet times feet would be feet to the third, feet cubed, cubic feet. That's why we put feet cubed, because we're doing feet times feet times feet. For the cylinder, it's bigger. Uses the same formula though, except instead of capital B being clicked on and replaced with LW, length times width, capital B is going to be pi r squared because this is a circle. What is the radius of that circle? 2, okay. So pi r squared times h. What's the distance between the front circle and the back circle? 5. Yeah. I see a lot of people put 4 here. We've already used 4. We used it when we did the radius. We actually went from diameter to radius. The height of the cylinder is not always vertical. It's probably more of a depth. So what is 2 squared? 4 happens to be 4. 4 times 5, 20. And I do 20 times pi then. What do you get? 20 times pi. Ella? That's right, 62.8. So I've got 62.8 cubic feet in a circle bale of hay and only 16 in a square bale of hay. So the next question then would be, how do I determine how many of these 16 cubic foot square bales of hay can fit inside of the circle bale of hay? Natalie? That's exactly right. Anytime I want to know how many times a number goes into another number, I just divide. Natalie, what will you get when you just put a big divide symbol right there? When you divide 62.8 by 16. Okay. And again, it wants nearest whole number. So would you say that's 3 or 4? That's going to be closer to 4. So 4 bales or 4 square bales would fit inside of the circular one. This is why I think you could have done this one already, because if you knew the volume of the cylinder, easy to find the volume of the prism and just figure out how many times 16 goes into 62.8. All right. That's the rest of your 8.1 notes.